Andrew Solomon is up next. And thank you, Andrew, for joining us this evening. He is going to be publishing a new book. His last one won, I don't know how many awards, several, many, multiple ones. But the new book is called A Dozen Kinds of Love, Family, Illness, and Identity. He's going to be exploring how families accommodate kids who are deaf, autistic, transgendered, prodigies, who've committed crimes, or who are part of other unusual family situations. And Andrew's reading really brings home to us our motto that human rights begin at home. Andrew?
I'm actually not going to be reading, but rather I'm going to be speaking because the material I'm looking at is from a work that's very much in progress. This evening we've heard a great deal about the terrible violations of human rights that exist in other parts of the world, that have existed historically, and that exist against minority and non-citizen groups in the United States. These stories are shocking, and the work that Breakthrough is doing in these various arenas is extraordinary and important, and I'm thrilled to be here with Breakthrough. I, however, am going to talk today about human rights abuses which are being practiced in the United States right now against children. I've been working for some time in the field of gay rights, and the transgender piece of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rainbow was something I had always been dimly aware of, and I decided when I started work on this book that I wanted to do further investigation in that area. And so I went off to talk to the families of people who were trans, and I became steadily more immersed in that world. I'm going to tell you just 3 of what could be dozens and dozens of stories. Not the sad stories of the people whose families reject them, which are another whole category, but the stories of people whose families have to struggle against the prejudice of a society capable of what has been to me an almost inconceivable level of cruelty. The first couple I'll tell you about is a lesbian couple who live in Wichita, Kansas. They have 2 children. Each woman has a child by a previous marriage, and the younger child, over the years, had consistently said that he was really a girl and kept wanting to be called by a girl's name and kept asking whether he couldn't wear a dress to school. And his mothers, who initially found this strange and rather embarrassing, eventually began to accommodate it at home, but told him that he couldn't do that at school and that he couldn't do it in public and that he would be possibly getting into trouble if he did. And so he, or she, as she came to be called, became more and more angry about having to live this kind of double life and tried more and more to put on a dress and run out the door. And at some stage, told the people at school that at home she was allowed to be a girl and that she wanted to be a girl at school and that it wasn't being allowed to happen. The school called the social services agency, and this very much loved child was removed from his parents' house, her parents' house, however one wants to parse it, depending which side of the argument you are on, and put in a so-called healthy foster family, where she was being made to dress in boys' clothes, where all of her hair was cut off, where she was made to live as a boy, where she was made to join a softball team. Her 2 mothers, who had loved and adored her, but who were not educated and who didn't know how to battle the system, tried to gain access to their child, which they were never able to obtain. They resorted to going and parking their car so that they could watch when their child was playing in a Little League game. And one of the mothers said to me that she remembered watching as her child was stuck in the outfield, dancing around like a ballerina, and got hit in the head with a ball, suffered a concussion, and was told to buck up and be a man. That child is still not back with his 2 mothers. They're now allowed to see their child in occasional supervised visits. It's been over a year that they have been trying to get their child back, and the child has said, "I am doing everything I can. If I have to be a boy to go home, I'll be a boy. I'll be a boy for the rest of my life, but I want to go back." And still that child is not allowed to go back. The second story I'm going to tell you took place in New York State, in Syracuse. Roxanne Green and Albert Cannon had a son named Moses. And when Moses was 14, he had always been very feminine. He left them a note one day and said, "I can't do this anymore. I have to live as a woman, and I'm going to change my name, and I'm going to dress as a woman, and if it makes you too uncomfortable, I'm happy to go and live on the streets if that's what I need to do. And I really don't want to talk about it with you. I'm just telling you what's happening." And they got home and they got that note and they went to see him and they said, Roxanne said to him, you're our child, whether you're our son or our daughter, you're our child, and we love you and we'll always love you and we'll help you be whoever it is that you need to be." They were living in the ghetto in Syracuse, and because Albert and Roxanne were so accepting, the other kids in the ghetto who were trans, of whom there were many, would come to that house because they could dress at that house and they could do each other's nails at that house. And it became kind of a center for all of these trans kids. And Albert and Roxanne loved this community of people whom they had suddenly been thrown in with, who were completely alien to any previous experience or any imaginings that they had had. And their daughter, who was now called Letitia, had only one dream. She loved doing hair. She did hair for all the girls in the neighborhood, and she wanted someday to open Letitia's salon. And when she was 22, she got a telephone call one day inviting her to come to a party, and she and her brother got in the car, and they drove to the party, and when they got there, there was no party. There was a man with a gun who shot her through the heart and the lung, saying, "I don't like your kind." Her brother said, "We have to rush to the emergency room," and she said, "No, take me home, I'm not going to make it." And she got home, and when I went to interview her parents in this little apartment up in Syracuse, there was a sort of shrine in the corner that had a picture, Tisha's favorite picture of herself as a bridesmaid in her sister's wedding, and the urn that contained her ashes, and a candle that her mother lit every morning and let burn down by the end of the day. And her father said to me, "I don't have much to save, but I was saving it so that maybe by the time I died, I'd have enough so she could get that operation she wanted. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it now." And her mother said, all she wanted was to open a salon. She was such a nice, nice person. The third story is about a family in Tennessee. The one I'm going to talk about was living in a small town in Tennessee. She was the first person in her family ever to finish college, ever to finish high school. She then went on to college. She qualified as a special ed teacher, and she got a job teaching in a school. She was living in a house in Mississippi that her father had built for her with his own two hands, and she taught right over the border in Tennessee in a special needs classroom. And she and her husband discovered that they couldn't have children, and having had that revelation, they decided they wanted to adopt. And they were in the process of setting up an adoption when she got a call one day from someone who said, "We have these 3 kids who are being taken away from their mother, who is abusive. They have 3 different fathers, but they've grown up so far as siblings. They're going into foster care, and there's no one who will take all 3 of them. All 3 of them are learning disabled. All 3 of them are special needs. Is there any chance that you would take in these 3 children?" And she said, "Of course I'll take the children." And then they called back the next day and they said, "I'm sorry, but it turns out because the children are in Tennessee and you live in Mississippi, you can't take the children." And so she moved out of the house her father had built her with his own hands, and she moved into a new house in Tennessee so that she would qualify. And she took these 3 children, and over the years that followed, she helped them, all of them, to come out of the special needs system. She got their ADD and their childhood bipolar diagnosed and treated, and she worked with them, and they were all in mainstream education. And the middle child, who had always been the easiest, at the age of 8, said, "I am a girl. You have always known that I'm a girl. I can't live as a boy anymore, and I can't have you calling me by the boy's name you've always used." And she didn't know anything about it, and she did some internet research, and finally she said, "Finish out the school year, and we'll try that for a week, and we'll see if you really like it." And so they finished out the school year, and in a week, this child who had been a morose, rather withdrawn, not very difficult but not very communicative, and quite unhappy little boy became a joyful, exuberant, happy girl. And so she went to the school and she said, my child, who is 8, is going to be coming to school next year as a girl, and we're going to use this other name, and I just wanted to let you know. And by the time she got home, the phone calls had started of people saying, we're coming for you, we're going to get you, you can't do this. She didn't even know who it was who was calling her. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. She slept the next week in a chair with a shotgun across her lap right inside the front door. And finally, the pediatrician called her. He was what passed for aristocracy in that particular small town. And he called her in and he said, the conversation at the country club this afternoon isn't about whether to kill your child. It's about when to kill your child and how to kill your child. So I think if you care about this child, you'd better get your child someplace else. And she got home, and when she got back, their family dog, a poodle, had been disemboweled and nailed to the picket fence outside of their house with a note saying, your child is next. The group of people who had done that included members of local law enforcement. So she's gone into hiding. And when I met her, she was living outside another city in America because she had found someone on the internet who said it wasn't so bad for trans children. She was living in a trailer park that this person had helped her to find. She can't get work doing special needs education because she can't supply any references, because nobody in her town can know where she is, because if anyone knew, they might be able to find her and they might be able to get her child, who she feels would be killed. And she was trying to protect her children from that knowledge and to live on the amount that she got for having adopted special needs children. And I said to her, what was it like for you fleeing like that? And she said to me, I'm going to tell you something that I've only told 3 people. She said, I've actually known since I was 14 that I was a lesbian. And all my life, I decided that if I said anything or did anything about that, I would be drummed out of town, and I would lose my family, and I would lose my house, and I would lose my community, and I would lose my church. And it wasn't worth it to me. So I married 3 men, and I made a life like that. She said, but I could do that to myself. I couldn't do it to that happy little girl who you see playing outside, she said. So I didn't give up all of those things lightly. I gave them up in enormous pain, but I wouldn't have done it any other way. Those are stories of human rights abuses, of people setting out to murder an 8-year-old child right here in the middle of the United States. I wanted to dedicate these words, which I've spoken today, to the memory of my college roommate, who was somewhat gender variant, and who was tortured for it when he was growing up, and who killed himself last Thursday. Thank you.